beyond the twilight and crimson blood that flows, buried in the stream of time, is where your power grows. I pledge myself to conquer all the foes who stand against the mighty gift bestowed in my unworthy hand. Dragon Slave!
Out of all of the anime revivals that we've seen over the years, I don't think that any of them were as improbable as the return of Slayers. After it debuted on the small screen 25 years ago and ran for 3 incredibly popular seasons, it vanished, seemingly lost in the endless void of incomplete anime adaptations. Then, over a decade later, it resurfaced to the surprise of its fans around the world, for a little while. After its surprising resurrection, Slayers once again vanished into the void, and it hasn't been seen on television since. In spite of this, hope isn't lost, and there have been new developments that have provided Slayers fans with hope for another return. The production history of Slayers is incredibly interesting, but even with all the time that's passed since it's finished airing, there doesn't appear to be a lot of information about it readily available, so that's what I'm here to talk to you all about today. I'd like to take a closer look at Slayers, from its light novel origins to its many adaptations, and the story begins exactly where you'd expect it to: Japan. Hajime Kanzaka was born on July 17, 1964 in Japan's Hyogo Prefecture. Although the details about his early life are sparse, he appears to have always had an interest in writing. One of his hobbies in his early life was writing and critiquing works of fiction with his friends. One of the stories that he worked on when he was in high school was a science fiction story starring a heroine named Luna, even though the story was never finished and has never been released. Luna, and the story that she starred in, would have a large influence on his later works. Although writing seemed to be a passion of his, he either wasn't able or wasn't willing to take the risk of pursuing writing professionally, and decided to take a standard office job. As you may have expected, Kanzaka wasn't suited for everyday office work. He found the work to be boring and wasn't motivated to work very hard. One day in the late 1980s, Kanzaka noticed something while reading an issue of Dragon magazine. They were holding a writing contest for original fiction stories. This contest was the first iteration of the annual and now long-running Fantasia Grand Prize. Being a big fan of fantasy and sci-fi, he decided to give it a shot. The work that he started in response to this contest would end up serving as the base for what would eventually become Slayers. However, at some point during the writing process, he decided to change things up. Kanzaka decided to change the story's premise, some of the characters' roles within it, and its tone. He did this because he was having trouble finishing the original story in time to submit it to the magazine's contest. This is where the story that he wrote in high school comes back into the picture. In that story, according to Kanzaka, there's a brain-reinforced clone of Luna, who is about 10 years old and is an abnormal machine maniac. That's Lena. In an interview about the history of the series, he said, "I thought, oh no, at this pace I won't finish by the deadline. I had no time to think the storyline over. Okay, then I should write unrehearsed while thinking about the storyline, and I began to write Slayers. As it's unrehearsed, it must be written in the easiest way possible. Okay, it will be a first-person novel narrated by a girl. Okay, I'll use the younger sister, Lena, from that story I thought of when I was a high school student. But it's unnatural for a 10-year-old girl to travel alone, so I changed her age to about 15 years old. There isn't an enthusiast for machinery in a world of swords and magic, so she should be an enthusiast of magic. I decided these things in about 30 minutes. I searched that story, which I had failed to finish, and used some characters in some episodes. One of those characters was a high-ranking officer working for one of Luna's enemies, a being known as Creator. Kanzaka described this man as being good-looking, clear-headed, and cold-hearted, and his name was Gauri Gabriel. Obviously, this character was the foundation upon which Gauri Gabriel was built, but Kanzaka had a completely different role in mind for the second incarnation of Gauri. In Slayers, the first volume, I made him a man who doesn't know much about magic because it was useful to explain how magic works. But I don't know why, but he became a man that doesn't know much about the past after volume 1. Well, that's the way the world goes. It's not a big problem because he is Gauri. Strangely enough, one of the characters that didn't fully make the transition from Kanzaka's high school sci-fi novel to Slayers is the most important one, Luna. Despite being the older sister of the series' protagonist, her name is never actually mentioned in any of the novels or in any iteration of the manga. She's only mentioned by name once, in an episode of the 3rd season of the anime Slayers Try. But otherwise, Lena simply refers to her as the girl from my hometown or something similar. The reason for this is simple, she's just too powerful. According to Kanzaka, more than anything else, the balance of stories would be broken if she appears, because she is pretty strong. She doesn't appear in Slayers because she breaks the power balance with Lena. Although Kanzaka has thought of including her in a side story, other than a couple of brief cameo appearances in Slayer Special, that would be Volume 3, Chapter 19, To Catch a Thief, and the 13th episode of the 5th season of the anime Evolution R, She's never appeared in Slayers. At the beginning of the writing process, he continued to work his standard office job, but spent lots of time thinking about his writing project. He even came up with the incantation for the Giga Slave while riding his bicycle home from work. A large portion of the first novel's narrative wasn't planned. An example of this is that he didn't come up with the main antagonist until about half of the first volume had already been written. All of the characters in Slayers, both his heroes and villains, were inspired by parts of Hajime Kanzaka's personality in some way or another. Another source of his inspiration was his favorite anime series, Mobile Suit Gundam. Kanzaka has also stated that he gets inspiration for his stories by going for walks and shopping. Once it was finished, the revision was titled Slayers, and the story's illustrations were handled by Kanzaka's close friend, Rui Arizumi, who has handled the series' novel illustrations ever since. His story was well received by Dragon Magazine and ended up winning the contest. Dragon Magazine then serialized Kanzaka's work as a series of short stories, with the first one being published in 1989. The following year, in 1990, Kadokawa Publishing decided to collect all of the serialized stories and publish them as light novels. The first novel, Slayers, was published on January 25th. The series would run for a decade over the course of 15 novels, with the final novel, Demon Slayers, being released on May 15th, 2000. The series' story is divided into two parts, with the first 8 novels making up the first arc, and the last 7 making up the second. Slayers was, and still is, an incredibly popular light novel series, having sold over 20 million copies as of 2018. Slayers wasn't Kanzaka's only work published in Dragon Magazine in the early 1990s. In February of 1991, after the release of the third Slayers novel, The Ghost of Cyrag, Dragon Magazine published the first volume of Kanzaka's second light novel series, Slayer Special. Slayer Special serves as a prequel to Slayers and focuses on Lena Inverse and Naga the Serpent. Its format is different from that of its parent series in that it consists of a series of one-shot stories, though some of them do last for 2 chapters. Slayer Special was also illustrated by Rui Arizumi and ran from 1991 to 2008, spanning 30 volumes. However, that wasn't the end of Slayer Special. Another 5 volumes were released as a direct sequel to Slayer Special from 2008 to 2011, but the name of the series was changed to Slayer Smash. Just before the turn of the millennium, Kanzaka released his third series of novels set in the Slayers universe, Slayers Delicious. Slayers Delicious was also illustrated by Rui Arizumi and was another prequel series featuring Lena and Naga. It consisted of 4 volumes, each containing a short story about the 2 protagonists. It ran from 1997 to 1999, and each volume was published individually by Fujimi Fantasia, a light novel-focused publishing label that was affiliated with the larger publishing company Fujimi Shobo, the company that operates Dragon Magazine. And while each novel was initially published individually, the stories were eventually republished in various volumes of Slayer Special. Despite there already being several different versions of Slayer's novels available for its fans to read, there were also several Slayer's manga released, including Slayers, Slayer's Super Explosive Demon Story, Slayer Special, Slayer's Premium, Slayer's Premium Plus 1, Slayer's Night of the Aqualord, Slayer's Revolution, Slayer's Evolution R, Slayer's Legend, Slayer's The Hourglass of Falchius, and Slayer's Light Magic. These manga were all fairly short, with the longest running series, Slayer's Super Explosive Demon Story, lasting for only 8 volumes. While many of the manga were mostly adapting various stories from the anime, OVAs, and/or novels, there were some original stories thrown into the mix. As you might expect with a manga catalog this large, there were various illustrators involved, and Rui Arizumi, the illustrator on the original Slayers novels and Slayers Delicious, was only involved with the first manga, Slayers. Some variation of Slayers manga was being published from July 1995, when the first volume of the titular manga Slayers was released, until May 2009, when the second and final volume of Slayers Light Magic was released. In the 1990s, Japanese businesses were starting to change how they were marketing their products. Products that used to be marketed solely in their original forms were now being released across various types of media, such as novels, manga, anime, games, CDs, TV dramas, movies, trading cards, and plastic models. This strategy was typically referred to as a media mix, and its goal is to increase sales and brand awareness by selling complementary products. Although this strategy has been implemented in some form or fashion since the 1960s, the strategy itself, as well as the name media mix, was solidified in the 1970s. One of the pioneers of this strategy was Kadokawa Shoten, the publishing division of the Kadokawa Company and manager of the Fujimi Shobo brand, the brand that published Dragon Magazine. As a part of their media mix plans, Kadokawa decided to adapt Kanzaka's popular novel series into an anime. They chose Easy Film Company Limited, or Easy Film, an animation studio that played a large role in the release of 2 manga adaptations between 1992 and 1994, to handle the production of Slayers' adaptation. While their anime catalog wasn't extensive or incredibly well received, it was an experienced animation studio. The first iteration of the company, Easy World Production Company Limited, was founded in 1971. It started out primarily as a subcontracting studio and worked on various projects, including Silverhawk and the original Thundercats. The reason why their name may sound unfamiliar is because, in Western markets, they adopted the name ENG, or Evergreen Films. Easy Film was established on July 21, 1986, after Easy World Production Company Limited merged with another studio, Lucky More Company Limited. In just 4 years after this merger, the studio had grown to the point where it could handle full-scale animation projects as their prime contractor. And 5 years after that, they would be working on the most popular animation projects that they ever produced. The first season of Slayers debuted on TV Tokyo on April 7, 1995, and ran for 26 episodes, with the finale airing on September 29. It was directed by Takashi Watanabe, who would go on to direct the next 2 seasons as well. Slayers was a loose adaptation of the first, third, and fifth Slayers novels, and a portion of the first volume of Slayers Special. It's a loose adaptation because there are some fairly significant differences between the original novels and the anime. The first major difference is that there is a completely original character, Zangulus. There are also several differences, each with a varying level of severity and frequency of appearance, even from series to series, that not only appear in Slayers, but throughout each anime adaptation, including the characters' abilities, character designs, new characters, missing characters, the order of events, and various general lore and setting changes. The very next year, in 1996, Slayers Next aired on TV Tokyo from April 5th to September 27th, and also ran for 26 episodes. Slayers Next was adapted entirely from the original novels, from volumes 2 and 4 and parts of volumes 5, 7, and 8. Although, like the previous season, it's not a one-to-one adaptation. Interestingly enough, despite it being animated, Easy Film's adaptation of volume 6 was scrapped. The reasoning behind the cut was that the animated material wasn't a good fit for the world and characters that had already been established. It's possible that decisions like this were easier this time around, because both Hajime Kanzaka and Rui Arizumi were working on the project. Kanzaka was placed in charge of the series' structure, and Arizumi was the concept character designer. They would both hold these roles for every other anime television series. The third anime adaptation was titled Slayers Try, and aired on TV Tokyo between April 4th and September 26th, 1997. Slayers Try, like the previous 2 seasons, also ran for 26 episodes. However, unlike the previous 2 seasons, it wasn't based on any of the original light novels. Instead of continuing the story from the 9th novel where Slayers' next story concluded, Kanzaka decided to write an entirely original story. Despite its differences to the original novels, Kanzaka still considers it to be a canonical part of the Slayers universe, functioning as a parallel third part to the original stories. However, since it follows Slayers Next, it actually falls in between the 2 main parts of the original timeline. In North America, the first season of Slayers was licensed by Central Park Media, who also distributed the series through their Software Sculptors label. As a part of their distribution strategy, Software Sculptors dubbed the series into English. It was released on VHS and Laserdisc in 8 volumes between 1996 and 1998. It was a huge commercial success for the company, which led them to acquire licensing and distribution rights for both Slayers Next and Try. Slayers Next's first run was similar to the original series when it was released in April of 1999. But Central Park Media released 2 box sets for the series, a distribution method that they helped to popularize in the West later in the year. They released Slayers Try in 2000 before re-releasing all 3 seasons in DVD box sets. The broadcast rights for the series were originally obtained by Fox Kids, however they decided not to air it because they didn't think it would be worth the time and effort to edit. This delayed the series' international broadcast television debut until 2002, when it finally aired on the international channel. Slayers was an incredibly popular series around the world and has been licensed, broadcasted, distributed, and dubbed in several countries and in many languages. The series has been officially dubbed in English, French, Spanish, Italian, German, Portuguese, and Tagalog, a major language in the Philippines. During the course of the 3 seasons of the anime, and even after the conclusion of Slayers Try, there were several Slayers movies that were released between 1995 and 2001. The first movie, Slayers the Motion Picture, which is also referred to as Slayers Perfect or Slayers the Movie Perfect Edition, aired at the Kadokawa Anime Festival on July 29, 1995. It was directed by Hiroshi Watanabe, animated by JC's staff, and distributed by Toei. This movie was directed and featured an original story written by Kazuo Yamazaki, and was the first anime adaptation primarily based on the Slayers Specials novels. In the Anime Encyclopedia, Helen McCarthy, a co-author of the book, said that in order to not disturb the continuity of the ongoing TV series, writer-director Kazuo Yamazaki opted for a story from a spin-off continuity, the Slayer Specials tales, set 2 years before Lena's first meeting with Gary. This film will be the starting point for the Slayers movie series. The second movie, Slayers Return, made its theatrical debut in Japan on August 3, 1996. Like the first film, it was produced by JC Staff and distributed by Toei, but there would be changes to how the film's staff was constructed. Slayers Return story was written by Hajime Kanzaka this time around. Kazuo Yamazaki would return to work on the film, but as a co-director with Hiroshi Watanabe. The third movie, Slayers Great, would be released the very next year on August 2, 1997, with the same staff members and production and distribution companies. JC Staff and Toei continued their annual release of Slayers movies with Slayers Gorgeous, which debuted on August 1, 1998, while Kanzaka and Watanabe would return to reprise their respective roles. Yamazaki did not. Slayers Gorgeous was also the last Slayers film that would serve as a prequel to the main series. The final Slayers film, Slayers Premium, wouldn't debut until December 22, 2001. This film was a major departure from the prior four films in several ways. There were major staff changes. For the first time since Slayers the Motion Picture, Kanzaka didn't write the screenplay. And for the first time in the entire film series, Watanabe wasn't the director. The film was both written and directed by Junichi Sato, who's most famous for working on magical girl anime like Sailor Moon. Next, it was very short, with a runtime of only 30 minutes. The companies working on it also changed. While it was still distributed by Toei, this was also the first film in the series to not be animated by JC Staff, with Hal filmmaker taking over production duties. Also, unlike the previous films, Slayers Premium isn't a prequel. Strangely enough, it doesn't even have a concrete place within the Slayers timeline. Another notable change is that Slayers Premium is the first animated form of Slayers, televised or theatrically released, to use digital animation techniques instead of hand-drawn ones. Between 1996 and 1999, JC Staff was also working on two Slayers original video animations, or OVAs. The first of which was Slayers Special, a 3-episode OVA based on the original novels of the same name. It originally aired on July 25, 1996, almost a year after the original Slayers anime had finished airing. It was written by Kanzaka and, like the original novels, serves as a prequel to the original series. The second project was Slayers Excellent, another 3-episode prequel OVA written by Kanzaka. It originally aired in Japan on October 25, 1998. After Slayers Try had finished airing in 1997, there were rumors that another season was in the works. This fourth season of Slayers was apparently going to be titled Slayers Again. The reason that the production never got off the ground was because there was a scheduling conflict with Lena Inverse's voice actress, Megumi Hayashibara. While there hasn't been any official confirmation on any of these rumors, and it's hard to find any supporting evidence, it's an interesting thing to consider. If Slayers Again was real and had actually aired, it likely would have been produced by Easy Film and retained most of the original staff. The fourth season of Slayers probably would be completely different. While we know now that Slayers would eventually continue, there was an extended period of time where its fans had all but given up hope, and as the years went by, its prospects were looking worse and worse. With Slayers Try finished and no word of a fourth season, Easy Film's relationship with Kadokawa didn't last into the new millennium. The last project with the company was an anime adaptation of Kanzaka's Lost Universe, which finished airing in 1998. Without the ability to work on a popular property, Easy Film was forced to take on smaller projects and return to working as a finishing studio. After Lost Universe finished airing, Easy Film only worked on 7 animation projects between 1998 and 2002, and none of them were very popular or well regarded. After their final project, an anime adaptation of the Barham 1 manga, finished airing in March of 2003, Easy Film closed its doors after working in animation for more than 3 decades. But why did things go south so quickly? Up until 1998, they had been working on one of, if not the most high-profile anime series around. So how did such a prominent studio get relegated to obscure adaptations and finishing work? It's actually a consequence of the very thing that brought them to prominence in the first place, the media mix strategy. Earlier, we covered the benefits of the media mix strategy and how it can drastically increase the popularity of an intellectual property, which leads to increased sales across their various media channels. The problem, like in many plans, is that there are always variables, the most important one being how popular the series becomes after producing products for it across the media mix. If the intellectual property, or IP, isn't popular enough to drive demand in each media sector, lots of people lose money. In a traditional media mix, there are several stakeholders. Even large companies aren't equipped to handle the production of an entire media mix strategy themselves. When creating anime, in order to produce high-quality products and reduce risk, the IP holders utilize a production committee. Funimation describes a production committee as a company specifically created to be a joint venture between a group of companies with the dual goals of producing something entertaining that will also recoup its cost and eventually lead to a profit. Each company in the venture has a different role, level of involvement, and risk, and each company invests money in relation to how much they stand to gain if the project is successful. The problems begin when it starts to look like the investment won't be profitable. Since each company has a financial interest in the project's success, they're all motivated to increase its profitability by reducing costs wherever possible. One of the easiest areas to cut costs is in the production of the anime itself in comparison to other projects. In order to minimize waste, strict budgets and timelines are enforced early in the production process. Animation studios like EasyFilm had to drastically change the way that they produced anime. A major cost-saving technique that anime studios would and still do use is the bank system. The bank system is when you establish a predetermined effect or animation that can be reused in particular situations. It acts like a bank in that instead of paying money to reanimate a scene, you can just withdraw finished scenes. But there is a limit. If you overuse the bank system, the animation can appear stale and bland, leading to a loss of viewers. While the animation department may have been the easiest part of the media mix to save money, it wasn't cheap to operate either. Just like the bank system, there was a limit to how much money you could save and still produce a quality product. Animation studios were held to very tight deadlines, which means that they had to get a lot of work done quickly. The smaller budgets didn't allow them to hire more people, let alone any people of note. You may think that they'd be able to cut costs by using new, inexperienced voice actors, but that isn't the case. In Japan, there's a ranking system for voice actors. For those who qualify, they are paid a minimum appearance fee based on their rank, and this amount doesn't change, even if they're only playing a minor role. Because it's difficult to cut costs elsewhere, the quality of the artwork generally bears the burden. This can lead to a decrease in the quality of the studio's work, or for the animation to be subcontracted to an entirely different studio. The tight deadlines and small budgets made it difficult for studios to operate efficiently, and many of them, like EasyFilm, were forced to close their doors. With the closure of EasyFilm in 2003, Slayers fans couldn't have been optimistic about the series' future on the small screen. The 15th and last mainline novel written by Kanzaka was published 3 years ago, and there hadn't been any news about future anime adaptations. While Slayers Premium did air just 2 years ago, it wasn't a typical adaptation and its reviews were mixed. Those who doubted that they'd ever receive a sequel to Slayers Try appeared to be right. Several years passed, but at the end of 2007, rumors started to swirl. On December 6th, the fan site Moonphase published rumors that TV Tokyo would rebroadcast the original series. Naturally, this raised eyebrows. Why would they be rebroadcasting such an old series? If this was true, it could mean that they were preparing for some new Slayers announcement. Those waves of excitement were seemingly dashed later that month. In the December 27th issue of Dragon magazine, there wasn't any information about Slayers to be found. However, less than a month later, things got even more interesting. On January 1st, 2008, Megumi Hayashibara released a short video addressing her fans. In it, she said, "Recently I feel a wind. That wind brings me an old character again. She has been sleeping long, and when she wakes up, I'll act her voice again, and I'll sing the opening song again. I'm waiting for the day when I'll be able to tell you the news." It didn't take long for this quote to spread across Slayers message boards, and 2 days later, some fans had discovered that a hidden message had been left in the official Kanzaka fan club, Mega Brain Kikuku. The message read, "There may be something this year." A couple of weeks later, another message was discovered. "When spring comes, will they lift the ban?" An issue of Dragon magazine came out on the 28th of January, but there weren't any announcements. The lack of any sort of confirmation in Dragon magazine, coupled with Gigazine's report that they hadn't received any sort of announcement of a Slayers rebroadcast, may have placed some doubts in the minds of fans. However, in February, things moved quickly. Another hidden message was found in Mega Brain Kikuku. "I think that you can put your hope on what you want to see." Then, on February 27th, someone posted information about the latest issue of Dragon magazine on the blog Koryaku-kan. They claimed that in this new issue, a new season of Slayers would be confirmed. The next day at 2 a.m., Kanzaka wrote a message on Mega Brain Kikuku that confirmed that Slayers would be returning. "I said that there will be very important news about Slayers, and that is the plan for a new TV anime. As you saw, my writing schedule after April is fluid, and it is because of the plan for the new TV anime and the renewal of Dragon magazine." According to his representative, the reason that they decided to post this message is because some stores were selling the issue of Dragon magazine a day early. Because the information was bound to get out, they decided to officially confirm it themselves. This message also provided additional details about the upcoming series. It would air in 2 cores or parts, with each one featuring a different story, and that each story would be an anime original. They were able to retain some of the original staff and all of the original voice talent, including series director Takashi Watanabe and lead actress Megumi Hayashibara. Since EasyFilm had already shut its doors, JC staff was a natural replacement. They had been involved in the production of the original series, and were the lead animation studio for 4 of the 5 Slayers movies and the 2 OVAs. With everything out in the open, Slayers fans could finally celebrate. The only thing they had to do now was wait. On March 19th, the May issue of Dragon magazine finally revealed the 4th season's title, Slayers Revolution. Slayers Revolution would debut on July 3rd, 2008 on TV Tokyo. It would run for 13 episodes, with the last one airing on September 25th. Since it was common knowledge that there would be 2 cores, fans may have speculated that the second one would be named something entirely different. Those that did would appear to be correct, at least initially. Animate.tv had a webpage featuring the Great Slayers Festival that was being hosted by the ATX television network. On this webpage, they displayed various Slayers products that would be featured at the festival. Right next to Slayers Revolution was another series titled Slayers Glory. with the sum of each totaling 26 episodes. While it was eventually removed, it had already been spread across the internet. As it would turn out, the name was only a placeholder. On October 25th, at an autograph session with Kanzaka and Arazumi, the title for the second cour was revealed to be Slayer's Evolution R. Evolution R would air on ATX from January 1st to April 6, 2009, and also feature 13 episodes. Both Revolution and Evolution R were licensed by Funimation for North American audiences. Episodes were initially released on their YouTube channel and website with English subtitles in July of 2009. In order to prepare these two new seasons for a home video release, Funimation entered into an agreement with New York Avenue Post to produce the English dub. New York Avenue Post was able to bring back most of the original Central Park Media voice actors, but there were several characters that had to be recast. Those characters were Zelos, Silphio, and Prince Phil. Funimation would release Slayer's Revolution on DVD on March 16, 2010, and Evolution R would follow shortly afterwards on June 1, 2010. They would both be re-released on Blu-ray, before being bundled together and released as a Blu-ray DVD combo pack. Slayer's Revolution and Evolution R wouldn't be as widely distributed or dubbed in as many languages as the first 3 seasons. They were only officially dubbed in 4 languages: English, Italian, Spanish, and Tagalog, down from the 7 languages of the prior seasons. With a series like Slayer's, a series that's gone from extremely popular to non-existent and then returned to relevancy, it's hard to guess what the future holds. Since Slayer's Revolution's final episode aired on April 6, 2009, there hasn't been a single animated Slayer's project released, but there certainly were rumors flying around. In 2012, Hajime Kanzaka addressed these rumors directly, saying that he had also heard the rumors, but that he couldn't say very much. After this statement, the brief glimmer of hope appeared to fade as it looked like fans went for another long, anxious wait for another announcement. In January 2018, Dragon Age magazine started the pre-publication process for a new Slayer's novel, which would be serialized on March 20th. On August 31, 2018, Fantasia Bunko announced that Hajime Kanzaka and Rui Arazumi would be releasing a new Slayer's novel. This novel would be the series' 16th, and the first time a new entry in the main series had been written in almost 2 decades, and it would be officially released on October 20th, 2018. In May of the following year, on a Fantasia Bunko livestream, Kanzaka confirmed that he was working on Slayer's 3rd arc, and that the next novel would be released that year. And on October 19th, 2019, the 17th and currently latest Slayer's novel was released. This is an interesting time to be a Slayer's fan. The time that's passed since Evolution R has aired is now greater than the time that's passed between the releases of Tri and Revolution. But despite this, there may be more reason to be hopeful for another season today than in 2004, with the biggest of those reasons being that Slayer's has already been revived once, and with new novels being published, it feels a lot more like waiting for an announcement instead of hoping for one.